Hi everyone, it's Kirsty and welcome back to Stuck in the Mud. Today's video is really talking about hitting kind of that rock bottom place, the OCD, anxiety, all the things can get you to. You feel like you're just stuck. You're at that lowest point you can probably think you can get to, although I'd say it's happened probably in my case there's been 3 really low times, but I'm going to be talking today about probably the lowest I would say I have got to. And I don't want to scare anyone with this video or trigger anyone or anything like that. But it's going to be an honest and raw account of what happened to me. Because it's been a long journey for me with OCD and anxiety. It's something I've always had since being a little girl, and I can feel myself getting emotional already because I know how tough it is. It's something that's always been there, and it's really hard to navigate life sometimes when, you feel like you're constantly filled with intrusive thoughts and questions and, you're questioning everything. And it's a really hard way to live. And, everybody gets intrusive thoughts, everybody, but people handle them differently. And that's the difference with people with OCD. We just get involved in them. And then before we know it, that you've gone down that rabbit hole and it's just gone out of control. But talking about my lowest point, I'd say came after I had my 5th child. So my 5th child is now 2.5 years old, or just coming up to. And it was a difficult time anyway, because we were in the pandemic when I got pregnant. In fact, it was just the start of it. But I'll give a bit of a backstory to that as well, because about a few months before I got pregnant with her, I actually was pregnant and then I miscarried about 7 weeks, although I didn't actually know about that till about 9 weeks because it was a miscarriage. So there was a lot going on. I just had this miscarriage. And by the way, I've got 5 children now. So prior to my last child, I'd had no miscarriages. I've never experienced a miscarriage, fortunately. Although I've since learned it's like 1 in 4. Is it 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage? But I hadn't experienced that before. And it was tough, because I was really happy about becoming pregnant again. All been planned and, I was really excited. And then I just lost that baby. And it was, although it was early, it was very triggering for me emotionally as well, because I was very, it's a hard thing to go through. It's something you don't really know until you go through it. And, you feel a bit silly. I felt a bit silly as well because I thought, well, it was so early, but, it's still a loss, isn't it? And, it was quite tough to handle at that time. Anyway, I will get through this video. So amazingly, after I lost that baby, I got my cycle back together. And literally the month after I got it back again, I got pregnant again. And of course, that pregnancy was just filled with fear and emotion because I was terrified of it happening again. Although everything just was perfect, it just went according to plan. I had an early scan. I did a few things, like I had some testing because I was actually 41 when I got pregnant with her. So I had some testing done when some blood tests. It was nothing invasive. It was just when I think I was about, I want to say 10 to 11 weeks gestation, So I had that done and we found out we were having a girl and it was amazing. I kept it on the low key though, I must admit. I mean, I didn't announce the other one either, but because it was so early. But even with some of my close family, I didn't announce until I'd gone past that first scan with the NHS. And then friends, I think, and because we're in the pandemic anyway, we were locked down. So I wasn't leaving the house anyway. I wasn't seeing anyone. So I didn't even announce it publicly, to friends until I think I was 20 weeks. I just had the next scan. So I left that. But the anxiety I felt, especially up until that point, because I felt better after the 20-week scan, because it just felt, as it moves on, the pregnancy, it's safer. But I was very on edge. All my appointments, I had to go in alone. So all the scans I had alone. And it was a really upsetting time that I couldn't share that with my husband. And it just didn't feel normal, the whole pandemic thing, and it was really hard when I look back on it now. And I was very obsessive about the whole pregnancy and what I was doing and trying to keep, those stress levels down and things like that. But it was fine, the pregnancy was great. The baby was, measuring okay. But as I was an older pregnancy, they did more checks on me towards the end of the pregnancy. And I think I do remember it flipping with that, I had a scan further on, and they wanted to do some measurements of the baby, and everything was normal, but they couldn't get one of the measurements, and then I had to go back again or something like that. And anyway, they measured her and she was coming out quite big. So at this point, I really had to start deciding of how I was going to have her. I've had 3 natural labours, by the way, the first 3. And then my little boy, who was number 4, I had a section with him, and that was an elective section because I was struggling emotionally in that pregnancy too. And that's another day. That story's for another day, because I'm talking about like really getting to the lowest point. I think it's probably all accumulation of all these things. It just got to a point when I felt like I couldn't take any more, and she was measuring big. Anyway, back to the story, and I was really having to kind of think about the delivery method, and I kind of felt like the C-section process with my son was very quite easy, if I'm honest. It was very planned. You knew when you were going in, you knew what was going to happen. Well, I didn't know what was going to happen. I'd never had a C-section, but as far as that, I knew it when it was going to happen, and it felt more organised, and there wasn't so much of the unknown, other than actually having a C-section, because I'd never had one before. But I went with it, and it was fine. The experience was the right experience for what I was going through at that time, and like I say, it was elective. It's a story I'll probably go into in more depth, but today is really about this. And so I decided I was going to go for the C-section because they were saying it was safer, because I'd had a C-section previously, although it was within 2 years, it was over 2 years, sorry, the distance between the two. They said it would be okay to have a natural labour, but with her measuring big, the consultant advised that it would probably best to have another C-section. So I kind of just went with it, although this time I just was so anxious about the delivery and having a C-section, and I was thinking, well, what if something goes wrong? The whole what if scenario came again, and it's something up until that point I was fairly relaxed in the pregnancy, but then once it was getting closer, and I think that's really quite normal, So yeah, I really struggled with the whole what if scenarios up until that point of going in to have the C-section. Now, I was having a lot of intrusive thoughts about what could happen, what could go wrong. It's just same old with OCD, it likes to throw up the worst case scenario. So it got to the day, the night before, packing my bag to go, and I wasn't in a good place at all. I physically shaking, didn't want to go through with it. And it was just after Christmas, actually. So, we'd had a lot of nice times, although we were cut off from family, but we had a relaxed Christmas at home. And then it was 29th of December, I was due to go in, and it just felt like something bad's going to happen. This is not going to go well. I had that really awful anxiety you get when you just think, this is going to be horrible. Something's going to go wrong, and I just couldn't cope with that thought. And I remember going in on the morning of the C-section, and well, actually the night before, I'll just say this, putting my little puppy in bed, and I'd grown so close to him in those 2 years, and I loved him so, and I love him so dearly, and to leave him, to go away from him, to have this baby, I just felt like, why have I done this? Why have I had another baby? I've got 4 healthy kids and putting myself through this, but I did, and we had to have the baby, she had to come out. So I went in that morning, but I was physically shaking. I just couldn't get myself together. So we had the mental health team come and see me, the lady who I'd been dealing with in the last couple of pregnancies, and she was amazing. She's absolutely amazing. The support she gave me throughout those last 2 pregnancies. So she came to see me actually that morning. I had the anaesthetist come and speak to me as well, because I was told when I was going to go down, and they all agreed that it was best that they get me in as soon as possible, although there was some emergencies and they had to take precedence, which is fine. It's what happens, and that's perfectly fine. But they agreed that they needed to get me in as soon as possible because I was getting myself into a right state. So I went in, and you know what? It was all fine. We had her, and she was actually within half an ounce, the same weight as my son. So she was just, I think, half an ounce heavier. And she was amazing. She looked great, but I was shattered, because of I hadn't slept the night before. I'd had to think about if I'd had an hour's sleep, I imagine that's all I got, and yeah, and the labour was okay, and we had a private room reserved that the mental health team managed to get for me, and that worked out fine. My husband was allowed to stay with me because I think we were in there about 3 nights, and everything was okay, although it was around the time people were allowed to go out, around before Christmas, and we decided not to see anyone, and we'd even taken the children out of school at that time because we didn't want to mix with anyone, with me being pregnant, and we, COVID was relatively, the figures were really high every day, and of the COVID, rates, and it was just, when you're pregnant, you just wanted to keep you and the baby safe. So we decided we weren't going to go out shopping and doing all the things that were allowed. I think, did they say you could? I can't remember. It's all seems a bit of a blur now, but we were alone that Christmas anyway, and I'm glad. I think it was the time they said you could have certain members of family over for Christmas, but we didn't, because I was due to have the baby. It just didn't seem like the right thing to do, and my parents were elderly as well, so it just wasn't the thing to do. So everything was okay, and I calmed down a lot after that point, but then I guess how long am I going to say? about 3 weeks after I had her, I started to feel different. I didn't, there was a few things that were different after I had this baby. I was nearly turning, or was I? I'd probably just turned 42 actually, because my birthday's in January. So we did a few things at home. It was weird because no one could come and see the baby because, of course, when I left hospital, we went back into lockdown, if we remember that second lockdown, the beginning of January. So as soon as we found out that, everything really changed. It was, no one could see the baby, and that just seemed like alien to me. Like when you have a baby, you just want to share that experience with everyone, but I couldn't. Even my parents, which was really, really hard. We did break the rules a little bit, and they came in and held the baby near the back door, but other than that, it wasn't the usual thing you'd have when you had a new baby. No friends could see the baby. Even my sisters didn't see the baby, and yeah, it was really, really hard. And I'm just looking back now, thinking how much that affected me. Really affected me that I couldn't have anyone see the baby, and things were hard at that point. We had help from my husband's mother and father, and that was really appreciated and was really needed, and they popped in when they could to kind of be in our bubble. But it just, things kind of steadily went downhill then. I was very emotional. I just kept crying all the time. And then you start thinking about postnatal depression. It's something I've probably had maybe once, but nothing like this. Nothing like this. I wouldn't even say that was postnatal depression. It could have been postnatal anxiety, OCD, that I'd had before after my third pregnancy. Now, this time it just felt different. Everything felt different. I didn't go back the same like I did. And you could say, well, you're in the middle of a pandemic, how is anything going to be normal? But I just gradually just felt different. My body ached, everything ached all over. I became very paranoid about pains I was having in my head here. So I actually booked a trip to see the doctor and said, I'm getting these pains in my head here, like headaches, and it was a really weird time, but I did go to the doctors, and I thought, well, get them to check it out. I'd had a C-section, I was older, I was having blood thinning injections as well that we had to have every day, so my husband was giving them to me. I just couldn't face doing it myself. And it just, something happened when she was 6 weeks old. I just felt I was getting worse emotionally. I was having a lot of panic attacks. And prior to that happening, I'd gone back on some old medication I was taking. It was clomipramine, if you've heard of that. And it's kind of, they say it's a very old OCD drug. And it does come with quite a few side effects, but I'd used it successfully in the past. I'd been on it for years on a low dose, and I said to the doctor, do you think it's wise probably going back on my low dose of clomipramine, so only 25 milligrams? And she said, yeah, that you're fine to go back on that. That's fine. I'll do your prescription. Now, I don't want to scare anyone off from medication because this is completely out there. I've taken that medication for years, and I've taken it at I've took it a much higher dose, and side effects were minimal. I had a dry mouth, maybe some, things like that. I'm feeling quite tired, but why would I think that anything would happen when I took this medication? So anyway, I decided to go back on the low dose. I'd not had it for a while. I didn't need it after my son, so I'll just take one. Now, what I can only imagine now looking back on it was I had a massive, massive panic attack after I'd taken the medication. I felt tired, went to lie down. And then I had this like feeling come all over me where I felt like this heat, and it felt like I was bleeding out, but I wasn't. And I look back on that now and realise it was a massive, massive panic attack. I ended up at hospital because I thought, what's happened to me? Something's going wrong. My blood pressure was high, but I guess having that massive panic didn't help. And, I was really wary about going back to the hospital because of COVID and just all that fear was around, and I don't know what happened. Theories were that maybe because I was on blood thinners, it just kind of got into my system quickly, and it just made me feel strange, but why would it? I'd had this so many times before. So I can only think that just the way I was made up, afterwards, and the way I was, maybe because of my age, because that is a thing, hormones start changing. Maybe nothing kind of went back quite the way I was before. And I think that maybe had a part to play in it. It was very difficult because no one could give me any answers really. They just reassure you. But, I was convinced something was wrong anyway. It got to about 6 weeks postpartum and I just really didn't feel well. I was having shivering and all kinds, and, I was in a really bad way. Little did I know, because I thought I was in the middle of the night, I'm shivering, shaking, ring 111. Their advice was to go to A&E, which at that point I felt so ill that I thought, I need to do this. So I did. And they got me in there, took my, my blood pressure and my heart rate, and I was straight through to, straight through to a bed. Apparently my heart rate was super, super fast, and they suspected infection. So I think because I'd been so run down after the birth and so depressed and anxious, whether that all contributed to me getting ill, but I was in a bad way. I'd kind of missed out part of the story there. They thought a few days prior to that I'd had a water infection because it was coming up in the sample I gave. So I was prescribed some antibiotics as well, but obviously they didn't work because at that point it spread through to my kidneys and gone into my bloodstream. So I guess the onset of sepsis. So I was lucky to get where I was quickly and get seen to, but being in hospital when all this was going on was just awful. I couldn't have anyone come and see me. And I was away from my baby, of course. She was only 6 weeks old. And I had a really bad infection. And I kept hearing them say this, when I was laying in the bed. And, I was very close to the nurse's station, so I could hear what they were saying. And I became paranoid about what they were saying and what was wrong with me. And it was a really, really difficult time that, because I'd never been so ill with an infection like that before. It was through to my body, affecting everything. And it was difficult. I'd come off my old medication as well, and it tried me on citalopram, but that wasn't going well at all. I just hated being on it. It just, even on a low dose, it just seemed to mess about with my eyes. But it's so hard because there's no one could give me an answer of what was going wrong. Obviously, I knew I had an infection, and I was really ill with that. I was in the hospital for 4 days with that. And then I had to come home. The only reason I was released from hospital was because they could administer the drugs I was getting through the IV at home. So I had a nurse come in every day to administer my antibiotics at home, because otherwise I would have had to stay in hospital on the particular antibiotics I was on because they weren't in an oral form. So that was really hard, and I was so wiped out with it all. And you know what? I had a few scary experiences in hospital. I had it where they gave me a particularly rough antibiotic, probably one of the, I've read since, it's like last resort antibiotic, but it really had a really weird side effects to it. Like I was having massive panic attacks in the hospital. I had people rushing in because I thought I was passing out, and it was just, when I look back on that time, it was so hard. Anyway, back to the story. I came out of hospital, and I thought, I've got to get myself together here. This is not going well. But I ended up calling out ambulances because I just still didn't feel right. Everything was weird. My vision was weird. I was really sensitive to the light now. And I've since read a lot of people talk about this, and I think it was postnatal anxiety and OCD, because I've heard so many people say having this, like, I had this really weird off balance thing for months after I had her, like months. Like I was not functioning at all, like not functioning to the point I thought, I don't want to be here anymore. It was bad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a bad time. But no one could give me a definitive answer, like what was going on with me. I was having tests, scans, because I said my balance was weird, and every time I walked, it felt like I was moving to the side. They think labyrinthitis. There was all these questions like fired up, but no one could actually tell me what was wrong. It was just I didn't feel the same anymore, and I thought, is this me now? Is this the way I'm going to be forever now? I was having these weird sensations in my head, like I say, floaters. And since reading about this, this is really common after a baby, and it's not talked about as much as postnatal depression, but postnatal anxiety, OCD, it throws up a lot of health stuff and anxieties, and it's actually, when I actually looked into it and read online, it's not just, you think of anxiety and OCD, all the compulsions and stuff like that. It's, you can have actual physical things happen because of the anxiety and the OCD, So other than having panic attacks, anxiety attacks, anything like that, the physical side symptoms of things I've never really experienced with OCD and anxiety before. But after this particular time, the physical things just weren't making sense. I thought my vision was off, like I say, balance, aches and pains. And then I started to question, was it my age? I've entered the perimenopause, my body makeup is not the same anymore. I've not gone back to how I was before the pregnancy. So that was thrown up as well as a possibility. I had lots of blood tests. Everything came back in the normal ranges, thereabouts. So they weren't particularly sure. And it's very hard to diagnose perimenopause. I know I'm at the right age for it to kind of start, and it can go on a long time. And that is something I'd like to discuss in a video, because I know mental health with the perimenopause and menopause, it can throw up kind of old patterns, and if you've someone that has maybe gone through mental health problems, it can throw those up again. So it's just being aware of that, and I wasn't aware of that, that it could throw up those things. So there was a lot of questions about whether it was to do with my age, perimenopause, just having a massive, quite a bad infection after my baby, or was it anxiety and OCD rearing its head again, and I think, honestly, it was a combination of everything. But when you're in that moment and you're having panic attacks 24/7, it just felt like I need to get away from all this. That was my kind of thinking in that time. It was just like I needed to get away from these thoughts, and I was trying to escape. And I did have some rough times where I just I'd randomly, go out the house, and, and I just didn't want to be in the house. And I was having panic attacks about everything. And, it was tough. And looking back on that time, it was just, I didn't see a way out. I just didn't see a way out of it. I just was in a really, really bad place and feeling, I had suicidal thoughts, although it was more of trying to escape the thoughts and the OCD and the anxiety. It wasn't because I wanted to be away from my family or anything like that. No one wants to be away from the family, but I think a lot of the time you just want to be away from the thoughts and all the feelings of the anxiety and the panic. So it was more just to try and escape, and I'd say things like, I can't do this anymore. And, it was making my family really worried because I couldn't find a medication that I was happy on. I was really scared of going back onto my old medication again because of what happened after I had the baby, and it threw up a lot of questions about what am I going to do. And, eventually, I did get back on some medication, some new medication. I got, I was under the actual crisis team. This is the closest I've ever come, I think, to being admitted to hospital with OCD and anxiety, because I was very scared to restart medication and scared about the possible side effects, because after obviously all that happened, it was a big unknown. Well, what's going to happen with this medication? I've never had this medication before. So I was under the crisis team. They were coming regularly to see me in the house, and I'd very, very, very up and down at that point. Some weeks I'd be doing better, some weeks I'd be really low, and then I'd have like a crisis and I'd have to ring the hotline, the crisis number, and say, look, I'm really struggling. I was prescribed diazepam to calm me down. It was really difficult. And, they did even offer me a bed in the postnatal ward. And I got to a place where I could have gone in, and at that point I was desperate. I was desperate for help. And I was so, so close to going. However, my husband really didn't want me to go. And I understand. He said the children really worried about you and they need you here. And as much as all that, and I knew that was important, I still wanted to go. Because I thought it's the only way I'm going to get better, because I feel scared of being in the house, because when I was in the house, I was just having like suicidal thoughts. I didn't want to be here. I thought I couldn't get better from this. I thought I can't do this again, because I'd had very low times before a couple of times, but managed to pull through. This time just felt like it was too much. There was a lot going on, and I realised now that a lot had happened, and also I was very concerned about my mum as well, because she was very ill at the time, and she's not with us anymore. I knew that was coming, but I think I'd pushed it to the back of my mind with the pregnancy and everything, because to lose your mum was really hard. And, that was a really bad thing to go through, after the pregnancy, just to find out that, and we found out in the pregnancy that my mum was ill again, and it was terminal this time, and to kind of process that, it was just so hard. I think I pushed it to the back of my mind, and you know what? We enjoyed the time we had together, and she loved children, but she passed away just before Aubrey, my youngest, she turned 2. So it was beginning of December last year, and it was a lot, going through being in hospital again and visiting in hospital and then bringing her home. And she thankfully stayed at home until she passed away, and I was with her when she passed away. And it was an honour to kind of hold her as that happened, because I've always been so close to my mum, But a lot happened, it was just a lot to happen in a short span of time, and also our business collapsed because that happened as well. And you know, it was really, really difficult, you know. But I didn't give up. And that is really what I wanted to say with this story. As though as bad as things got, I really didn't give up, because I remember sitting there one day, I was barely functioning. It really didn't get a lot better that first year after I had her. I'd say after her first birthday, things picked up. They weren't perfect, you know, and I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy, because it isn't. I know it isn't easy. To live with OCD and anxiety is extremely, extremely difficult. I'm glad I'm in a position to understand you and where you're coming from, because I know it's hard. So hard to get through the days sometimes. When you have a day with intrusive thoughts, it's hard. You know, you wonder, you get up in the morning, you wonder how you're going to get through the day, but you do. And this is what I wanted to say. There is hope. There is help. You know, I've received help again with a therapist, and, you know, it really did help me, you know, and I know it's not always easy to reach out for help, but you really need to. It is there when you're in those really like dark places. For the most part of my life, you know, OCD has been manageable. It's been, I've had lots of times when I've been, is it there in the background? Yeah, it is, but I can function, and I can, you know, live a normal, happy life. But after my last daughter, I'd say it's been more difficult. And yeah, because I've had a lot going on, you know, when I look back to where I am now, you know, I'm like a different person. As bad as things felt like they were, I was determined to get better from it again. And now I'm determined to help others, because I know how hard it is, and what I want to do now is help. Because although I'm sitting here crying, which isn't probably the best look, but I know you can get better from it. And I've had so many times when I've been living a happy, fulfilled life, you know, and I know the tools and what works. I know what doesn't work, you know. So these are what these videos are about. It's just to kind of pass on my knowledge and what I've learned, because a lot of people don't always know they have OCD, which, you know, it's something I didn't find out till I was in my 20s, you know. But I always knew that I had these rituals and stuff, but it's something that wasn't really officially diagnosed probably until my 20s. And like I say, relatively, you know, I've coped really well with it over the years. I've had my darker times, and I really want to delve into pregnancy and OCD and anxiety, because it really triggered me a lot in pregnancy. And I'm not going to scare anyone that might be feeling this way, because it doesn't always happen. I've had pregnancies where I've not struggled at all. You know, it's been plain sailing. You know, I've had a happy, healthy pregnancy and not needed help during the pregnancy. Then I've had other pregnancies where I've needed support from the mental health team. So yeah, it was a lot. I think it was a lot to process, and having a baby in the pandemic probably wasn't the wisest decision, but you know, it happened, and we're very happy she's here, and so thankful that she came safely, and you know, everything went according to plan. But yeah, it was I'm doing a lot of learning at the minute since I've had her, you know, and learning about what's kind of triggered me over the years with these things, and where it might have come from, and that has been helpful to me personally. It's not always helpful to everyone, you know. It's important to stick to the therapy you're doing, and you know, and that will help, you know. But I want to talk about all the different therapies that have worked for me, and pass those on to you, and see if these can help you, because you can get better from OCD and anxiety, and it doesn't have to feel like you're just surviving life. You know, you can still live a fulfilled life, you know, and that's what I really want to get across with these videos, because it can feel like living life with gloves on, you know, you're not feeling anything because your thoughts and your mind, it feels like it's elsewhere. So it's just try using those tools to get you back living your life to the full, you know, and this is how I hope I can help you. And so future videos, like, I'm going to be really raw and honest about my experience, and hopefully that can help you to have someone to identify with, because you speak to a lot of professionals, and as good as they are, they've not always been through it, have they? And sometimes it can feel like, can they really relate to what I'm saying here, you know? But I've been there, like you say, some of the darkest places I've ever been with OCD and anxiety, and I really want to help others now. You know, I've got to an age where I used OCD as an excuse that I couldn't do this, but now I know I can, because I know I've come through it, and I know you can too. So I hope this video has been helpful to you. Like I say, I don't want to alarm anyone or trigger anyone, you know, it's not my intention. And, you know, I just want to let you know you can get better. There is help available. There are things to get better from OCD and anxiety, although sometimes it feels like, how am I going to do this? You know, it just sometimes feels impossible, but you can get better. It doesn't have to be like a life sentence. It can feel like that with OCD, because you feel like, am I going to be this way forever? And you can live a fulfilled life. It doesn't have to take over. It doesn't have to take over your life. We can respond differently to these thoughts, and it's just about finding the thing that works for you. And I want to share in my videos the things that have worked for me and helped me over the years, because I've functioned really well over the years. Pregnancy has been an issue, although not every time. So yeah, but you can get better. And as a community and sharing experiences, we can support each other, and you can get better, and you will get better. And I'll see you next time.